Aaron Cohen. I was Rabbi Aaron Cohen. I've been trained in my young years in rabbinical training, and which I practiced in a way for a number of years in rabbinical activity. And then I was in commerce for many years, and then later on I went into teaching, religious teaching. Zionism is a secular nationalistic concept which came into being about 120 years ago. Totally opposed by authentic Judaism. Authentic Judaism goes back thousands of years, and it's a religious way of life, religious concept, full of ethics and morals and compassion for one's fellow man. Goes back probably 3,500 years. Zionism is a nationalistic, secular concept, selfish, purely with the aim, they thought they had a good aim, but it's purely with the aim of finding a place for what they thought they were helping the Jewish people, a place for Jewish people to live. But they did it in a way which was totally opposed by Orthodox Judaism. There's a lot to say about that, but the fact is that Orthodox Judaism incorporates within it's a way of life, covering every aspect of life actually, but it incorporates within its ambit the idea that the land of Palestine is a place where Jewish people would live. We were promised that in our teachings. But this promise was, we are taught that it is a divine promise, a divine assurance, but it was subject to conditions. And the conditions were that we had to live our lives in a special way, high-level, moral, religious way. And we were warned that if the Jewish people would not maintain the correct levels of behavior in every way, then they would not be able to live in the land of Palestine. And as I said, the Jewish religion came into being about 3,500 years ago, and for the first 1,500 years or so, they did live in Palestine, the Holy Land. But although there were many great righteous people within the Jewish nation, but generally speaking, they did not maintain the standards to the level expected of them. And the warning that they would not be able to keep the land of Palestine if they didn't maintain those standards, that warning came into being. And what took place then was a divinely decreed exile. And that is our teaching, that the Jewish people were sent into exile about 2,000 years ago. And they were, as history confirms, they were spread around to the four corners of the world. And we're taught that this exile is a divinely decreed requirement. And the requirements of the exile are that we have to live as good citizens. We have to live as good citizens in the countries in which we find ourselves, including Palestine, because Palestine no longer we were exiled from Palestine, no longer under the political control of the Jewish people. And we have to live as law-abiding, peaceful citizens, and that is and live our lives in the way that we are taught. That is our teaching. In no way, added to that is that it was very stringent, this teaching, because we were warned that if we didn't keep to this requirement, there would be very dire repercussions. And it would be very dangerous for the Jewish people if they didn't keep to this requirement. And we were put under oath that is our teaching, we were put under oath that we had to keep to these requirements. Then along came the Zionists. Now, the Jewish people did, over the years of their exile, in various places they have suffered, particularly in Europe, mostly in Europe, in the last 1,000 years. And there were various episodes going back to the Crusades and later on other pogroms of various forms. And then about 120 years ago, the irreligious Jews thought, well, we're going to solve this exile problem and we're going to try and make a land of our own, which we were forbidden to do. I mean, we understand the problem, but we were forbidden to try and solve it with the efforts of our own hands. It will only be resolved by the Almighty at a time and in a way in which He wishes. But until that time, we have no right to use our own efforts to make a state of our own in any way. And to do so would be very dangerous for the Jewish people. And then along came the Zionists, and they said, no, well, they are secular Jews. They didn't believe in the teaching that we had. And they said, no, let's take things into our own hands, and we're going to make a state of our own. And there was various discussion where that state should be, but anyway, they opted for Palestine. But of course, they, apart from the fact that they were now going against the teaching of our religion, that you mustn't take the law into your own hands and form a state of your own, they were also ignoring the fact that there was another people, an indigenous population in Palestine. And they decided, no, that doesn't worry us. We will override the requirements of that people. And so that again was a terrible contravention of Jewish values, because not only were they going against the belief that we're not allowed to take a country into our own hands and take things into our own hands and form a state of our own, but they were also adopting a way which was totally against the teachings, the compassionate and humanitarian teachings of the Jewish religion. And so they came to Palestine, and a confrontation set up, which that was about 100 years ago or so, and a confrontation, of course, leads to violence and leads to bloodshed on all fronts, whether Jewish or non-Jewish. So you asked why we are against Zionism. From what I've said, you will see that it's obvious why we're against. It's against our belief, and it's against our values of humanitarianism. And we feel that it's not more than we feel. We are taught that it is probably the biggest disaster that's happened to the Jewish people since they have been in exile. You ask why we burn the Zionist flag. Well, of course, that's just a symbol, really. The Zionist flag is a symbol of the secular nationalism which we totally oppose. And obviously, we burn the flag because it's something which we are violently opposed to. When I say violently, that means we don't take the law into our hands to the extent of hurting other people, of using physical violence, but we express that opposition by taking their symbol, which is their flag, and burning it on various occasions. The Star of David is actually an ancient symbol which was used by Orthodox Judaism going back for probably thousands of years. But the Zionists, like everything else, they have, to use an expression, they have hijacked, as they have hijacked other aspects of Judaism. They have come, something I didn't mention earlier, they have set themselves up to be the representatives of the Jewish people, which is totally false. They do not represent all the Jewish people by any means. And one of the things they've hijacked is the Star of David. Once they've hijacked it, we don't want it anymore, because if it's become a symbol of Zionism, then we don't. Although it's sad, because it was something which was used by Orthodox Judaism, but once it's been taken over by them, then we don't want anything more to do with it. The Zionists have been spectacularly successful in their propaganda in making people think that they represent the Jewish people. When Zionism was first formed, it was almost totally opposed by the Jewish people, whether secular or non-secular or religious, but it was opposed. But the Zionist propaganda machine has been and continues to be very powerful, and they try to set themselves up as the representatives of the Jewish people. But what has to be remembered is that they do not represent the Jewish people by any means. They've been able to persuade non-Jews and many Jews, sadly, to the correctness of their idea. But as I said earlier, what has to be remembered is that this is wrong. They do not represent the Jewish people in any way. There are two camps within non-Jews. There are those who support Israel and those who don't support Israel. But those who don't support Israel run into millions, maybe billions of people, particularly the Muslim world. And the Zionists, because they represent themselves as the representatives of the Jewish people, so the non-Jewish world who don't support Israel blame Judaism and Jews for the wrongdoings of the Zionists. And our job, what we try and do, is people should remember, the world should remember, that Judaism and Zionism are two totally opposing concepts. Don't blame Jews and Judaism for the wrongdoings of Zionism. It's two completely different camps. At the end of the day, Zionism will not last. We are certain of that. It won't last. How long it will take to come to an end, we don't know. We hope as soon as possible. And we hope in a way which should be without bloodshed, if possible. And it is possible. The Almighty has got his ways. We only have to look at countries like South Africa and the Soviet Union. They are two mighty regimes which came to an end almost bloodlessly, and people would never have believed that this would happen. And the Zionist regime can also come to an end if the Almighty wishes. It can come to an end bloodlessly. And our prayer is it should come to an end completely and be replaced by a regime which is acceptable to the Palestinian people, and go back to as it was historically, that Jews and Arabs and Muslims lived peacefully alongside each other for hundreds and hundreds of years. And that is our prayer. And of course our eventual prayer is that we should merit the time, this religious prayer, merit the time when the glory of the Almighty will be revealed over the whole world. And I spend a lot of my time nowadays in trying to spread this message. Don't confuse Zionism and Judaism. Don't conflate Zionism and Judaism. Absolutely. The old form of bigoted anti-Semitism, just hatred of a nation for the sake of being a particular people, it was very prevalent right up to, especially in Europe, particularly in Europe, right up to the Second World War, and culminating in the terrible destruction that took place in the Second World War. But since then, generally speaking, worldwide, that sort of bigoted hatred has disappeared. But what has taken its place is a hatred of the Jewish people, because people believe that the Zionists and Jews are one and the same, and therefore they do blame Jewish people for Zionism, and so that has produced a new form of anti-Semitism. And the real cause of any hatred of Jews nowadays is because of Zionism. We don't really know the way that madman's mind worked, because he was a madman. There's no other way, no other description for it. But a very wicked and powerful man. How he came into a position of power is just the will of the Almighty. I would imagine he was always prepared to exterminate them, but he probably thought earlier in his early political career, he thought that it wasn't going to be a practical possibility. Maybe I'm only giving a theory, and I don't know. I mean, we don't really know. And then as the war, as his rule moved on, and as the Second World War moved on, the idea of exterminating became more practical possibility from his point of view. Our approach, the Orthodox Jewish approach, is conciliation. We have always done that right through the years. We've been through many, many very, very difficult situations in various lands in which we've lived. Now, our teaching is conciliate, be good citizens, try and comply with the wishes of your rulers, even though the rulers might not be the most wonderful rulers in the world, but try and live a peaceful life. And when Hitler came to power, that rule still applied, although he was a very, to what extent it would have helped, I don't know. He was such a terrible, wicked madman, it's hard to know what would have happened. But certainly, had we been conciliatory, then the result must have been better than being antagonistic to him. And the Zionists, they've always adopted the idea that they don't rely on the wishes of the Almighty, they rely on the power of their own hand. And they said, no, this man is against the Jewish people, so we will go against him. And they brought in the boycott. They were saying, I don't know, you know the history probably of it. They brought in the boycott. And of course this infuriated Hitler, and it is said that when he heard about it initially, about this boycott, he went into a mad fit and said, now I will exterminate them. And it could be that is what triggered it, but one doesn't know. One can only conjecture. The Zionists at all times, right from their thought, they were never genuinely intending to help the Jewish people as a whole. They were nationalists, so they wanted to form a country of their own. And a state of their own, whatever was needed from their point of view to help the formation of their state, they did, and they were very callous about it. And in those days, during the 30s, they saw an opportunity for bringing new pioneer blood into Palestine. That's what they wanted. At that time, Palestine was under the British mandate. And Britain, for whatever crazy reason, we don't even know why, supported them very strongly. And possibly because they thought also they were helping the Jewish people. They were very wrong, because the Zionists didn't represent the Jewish people, but they had the impression that they did. And they wanted to help the Jewish people form their state in Palestine. And that's, of course, there you had the Balfour Declaration and the idea that they were going to help them. At that time, there were 600,000 Palestinians in Palestine, and there were 60,000 Jews. Now, it was ludicrous to say that 60,000 should have the same rights as 600,000. Their main aim was to build up the Jewish population of Palestine whatever way they could. and but they wanted to build it up ideally with people who could help them build their state. So they were looking for young pioneer material, and so they saw that Germany wanted to expel the Jewish people. So they said, well, okay, let's do an arrangement with Germany that will at least will bring the young pioneer material into Palestine. They weren't interested in the old people or the old people or people who couldn't really help the formation of their state. But if they could get young pioneer material from Germany, why not? They were very callous about it. The fact that it was Nazis didn't worry them too much, and they did. Of course, it's very well known. It's documented that they collaborated with the Nazis to the extent of getting as many of the right type of person that they wanted to come to Palestine. Some of what you said was very radical. We don't really know to what extent they would have actually supported, actively advised Hitler to set up death camps. That's a very strong and harsh accusation. It may be true, I don't know, because they're capable of it, but we don't really know that. But they certainly weren't concerned about it. What is documented is that they were quite ready to ignore the needs of the people who weren't suitable to come as subjects of the new proposed state which they were forming, and they were very callous about it. They said if they have to die, they will die. Whether they actively encouraged Hitler or not, I don't know. I can't answer that. But what is documented that they were very callous about it. They weren't that bothered in any way about the fate of the general state of the general nation of the numbers of Jews. And the second part, what you said, is certainly true. During the war, they were callous about the intentions of the Nazis, and they took advantage of the fact that they would help them get their correct material into their state. And then, of course, after the war, they jumped onto the other bandwagon and said, well, yes, there's been a Holocaust. Now it's become our Holocaust. They call it their Holocaust. It's become our Holocaust, and that gives us the right to do what we like in Palestine, which, of course, is totally wrong. I would go along with him. I mean, it's hard to know to what degree that is, but there's no question about it that the Zionists used the Holocaust, and they still use it, as a means of levering pressure on Germany to extract as much money as they can. They of course, they say it's because, well, we've got to take revenge. Germany's got to pay for what they did. What one has to understand, a very basic thing, which the approach of Orthodox Judaism, as far as Nazi Germany is concerned, is this, that a very basic philosophical concept in Judaism is that whenever an evil deed is perpetrated by one person or group of people against another person or group of people, it is not the job of the victim to extract punishment from the perpetrator. That is the job of God. That's the Almighty's job. The job of the victim is to accept what's happened to them, even though it's been perpetrated by other people, and to do introspection, to look into their own affairs and say, what has caused, why has the Almighty allowed us to go through this suffering, and how do we have to improve ourselves in order to prevent that in future? Not the way of prevention is not. It's not our teaching that we have to look to the perpetrator and extract punishment from him. That is not our business. They will get their punishment. If they did a wicked deed, they will be punished. But it's not our job to do it. That's the Almighty's job. Our job, the victim's job, in any case, in any event of suffering caused by another person, is not to blame the other person, but to look at introspection, look at himself. And that has, and that's exactly how the Orthodox view is. It's not our job to start trying to extract as much as we can from Nazi Germany. That's the Almighty's job. But the Zionists, because they don't have a religious approach at all, their approach is relying on their own physical powers and military powers and so on. They say, yes, well, we have to extract what we can from from Nazi Germany. Okay, I'm not familiar with the organisation, but I understand what it was, and of course, if the motive of the organisation was a noble motive, and they did, we can only commend what they did, but I can't say more than that. It's as I said, our approach is a conciliatory and passive approach. But if another organisation or group or country take up the cudgel, take up the effort of extracting revenge or extracting punishment for a certain bad deed, well, they have the right to do so. A bigoted hatred of the Jewish people is something that's been around ever since the Jewish people existed. And there have always been people who have had that feeling. But our teaching again there is, okay, it's there, ignore it. It's not our job to try and eradicate it. We'll never eradicate it. So in Poland, at the end of the day, in Poland, as in any country, there's all sorts of people. The Jewish people lived in Poland for hundreds, possibly thousands of years, and there were very great, thriving communities in Poland. But there were, I mean, one cannot deny, there were Poles who were anti-Semitic. So what should one say? It's sad that anti-Semitism did exist in certain quarters of Poland, but I wouldn't say that Poland has got a history of being totally anti-Semitic in any way. On the contrary, they were the host of Jewish people for hundreds and hundreds of years. As you said earlier, the vast majority of the Polish people, they themselves were under occupation, and they had no sympathy in any way with the Nazi regime. The Polish government have every right to adopt whatever law they wish. They are their masters in their land. As Orthodox Jews, we have no problem with that at all. If they want to forbid the reference by the media to the Polish death camps, and by all means, they have every right to do so. There certainly should not be any objection to it in any way, and they have no, people outside the country have no right to object in any way. The country is entitled to do what they want within their own country. It's not harming anybody. It's only the Zionists find it that it upsets their plan, or it looks like that anyway. The Zionists find it upsets their plan of perhaps of extracting more money from Germany, or maybe even from Poland for the Nazi death camps. And our view, of course, is that is totally wrong. I'm not now talking from a religious point of view. I can only give you a personal opinion. Personal opinion is there has to be just behavior. As far as listening to the complaints of the Zionists about Polish legislation is concerned, I would say they should take no notice of them at all. Poland should take no notice of the Zionist complaints. Poland is a right to do what they have within their country.